Okay, this is going to be chapter 2 from the book Food, Mood, and IQ by me, Pete Rogers. And you're going to remember this the rest of your life. This is like the real inside scoop on what's happening in conventional medicine psychiatry. Okay, so the title of chapter 2 is Who is the Crazy One? I grabbed my father's shirt and I tipped his chair over backwards. My left hand held him down, and my right hand took the plastic pill bottle and pushed it into his mouth. And I said, if you ever try to make me take another pill, I will shove it down your throat. Do you understand me? Okay, this is me in my senior year of college at Stanford, team captain of the wrestling team, student athlete of the year at Stanford. Most wins in a season was the all-time record up to that point of 39. And all of this started during my third year of medical school. My estranged Juilliard professional musician girlfriend, who I loved very much, gave me an ultimatum. Either move with her to Europe or we were going to break up. And here she is. And, she's great. This is my love of my life. She's really smart and nice. She's got a relatively stable mood for a female. I should have married her, but it was complicated. She was like perfect. There was like the happiest days of my life with her. Her music and my wrestling and my becoming a doctor, my scholarship to Stanford, they all kind of pulled us apart. And really, musicians and doctors are kind of star-crossed lovers because they don't go together. A musician is going to perform in a show, like Les Miserables comes to town. They're going to be performing in the orchestra. And then after the show, there's a cast party, on most nights. And so a doctor, though, is the opposite. Me, I was a surgeon initially, you go to bed early. You got to be in the hospital early and make rounds, and then you go to the operating room, and you're doing procedures all day. It's not good for staying out late. And doctors study at night, go to bed early, in the hospital for rounds by 7 a.m. or even 6 a.m. Even some services I've been on, we made rounds at 5:30 a.m. Okay. So I also figured if I married her, there would be constant tension, after of her like being expected to go to all the cast parties and me going home early to be ready for surgery the next day, her constantly being hit on by men when I wasn't around and maybe eventually succumbing to that in exchange for favors for her career. She was absolutely gorgeous. And I knew I loved her. I was very happy with her, and just being around her I was happy. We were just happy together. And I liked the fact, too, she really knew all this classical music, the history of classical music and everything that went with that. So it was interesting to talk to her, okay, because most of my girlfriends really don't have much to say to me. I mean, she was interesting, and I would go to the concerts with her at Ravinia and in the city and stuff, and it was great. I liked it. Okay, my parents thought that our relationship was just the usual teenage first love, splendor in the grass sort of thing, that I would grow out of it. They knew I was destined to become a doctor, a great doctor. I was the best student in my medical school class of 333 students, 99% scores on my boards, like about the best biochemistry student in the whole United States. I did everything you could expect and hope for a medical student. Here's my picture in med school. But there was something was wrong. I wasn't that happy, and I didn't know how to articulate it, the reasons for it then, but I knew something was wrong. Something was missing. Like when I was a wrestler and we won a tournament, or one of my coaches won something, or my teammates won something, we were happy. We were excited. That was meaningful. But I would go on clinical rounds, and it was like there were some high moments like delivering a baby, but there wasn't much emotion. There wasn't much of a sense of achievement. It was like we were going in circles. The patients hardly ever got better. It wasn't like Marcus Welby TV show where he cures patient after patient. There weren't too many miraculous recoveries. And the attending physicians were polite professionals, but they were kind of boring. I also didn't meet, where are these big doctor intellects? I wasn't meeting like real smart people. It was just sort of like a mundane, almost a hierarchical, corporate organization or something. I seldom ever heard anybody tell a clever joke or anything interesting. It was nowhere near as fun as hanging around with friends or athletes. It was more like being a private in the Army. You just shut up when you're the junior person and do as you're ordered, and all commands were obeyed. The chain of command was respected from medical student on up to junior resident, senior resident, chief resident, fellow. junior attending, senior attending, okay? I mean, it was very hierarchical. And we all had a role to play. We performed our duties as expected, but it was mostly run, 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 run for a short slide. It usually seemed like not much was happening. Where were the cures? Where were the big moments? Where were the great achievements? I was starting to sense that there was no way to excel. And I wanted to excel, big time. That we were more like generic cogs in a giant assembly machine just there to crank out billing codes. I had considered being a wildlife veterinarian. I shadowed an eccentric wildlife zoo vet named Peregrine Wolf. She was fun, and I learned a lot from her, but I could see that very little resources were devoted to this, and there were few jobs available. I figured if I went down that route, I would end up in Podunk, Montana, putting electronic ear trackers on tranquilized beasts, and that no one would want to pay for the advanced stuff, imaging and surgery of the animals. So after taking zoology and animal husbandry courses, I reluctantly let go of that wildlife vet dream. I kind of wanted to be a wildlife vet, to do something better than my father. I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for my father because he wouldn't let me do a redshirt year in college, and I wish I had done a redshirt year in college because I should have been an All-American. I was like one victory away from being an All-American. If I'd had one more year, I would have done it, I think. So anyways, truth be told, I was disillusioned also with the environmental movement, okay? My foray into wildlife biology had started back at Stanford with field trips to the national parks like Yellowstone, going bird watching, taking black and white landscape photographs like Ansel Adams, and I did really like all that nature stuff. True appreciation in nature is a very beautiful thing. Like here's a photograph of Ansel Adams, the Teton Mountains, and he has lots of magnificent photographs. They're just aesthetically beautiful, you know, it's God's creation, okay? What turned me off, though, was the dawning realization that the environmental biologists hated people. They were always against the farmer, no exceptions, and they wanted to take land away from the farmers. They would say things like, wildlife management isn't really wildlife management, it's managing people. The people are ruining the land. We need to get them off the land. I had spent a summer at Iowa State University training for wrestling with the Iowa team out there, and I had met some farmers and lots of their children. I really liked the farmers. I was friends with them. They were good, hard-working people, and they provide food from us. What more could you ask? And all of this and some other failed adventures, like, you know, I was real into chemistry. I was going to maybe become a biochemist, but my advanced synthetic organic lab, I hated it. Everything smelled like paint. And so I'm like, no way can I do this for a living. And that led me to go back towards medicine, what my parents had originally wanted for me. Okay, but still I'm sad. That's also the name of a song for the group Rainbow. I was giving up the woman who I loved in exchange for being a boring doctor, is what it seemed like, a boring job. I'm like, why do I give up the thing I really love and want for something that I don't think I really wanted? But I seemed like pulled by a magnet down that path, and I couldn't change course. I was a young guy, and medicine was turning out to be much more monotonous than I had expected. My dad was a double-boarded psychiatrist, chief of 2 departments, psychiatry and substance abuse, detoxification. He made lots of money. Back in those days, doctors made tons of money. My dad probably made what would be the equivalent of $1 million a year back in his time. He had been valedictorian of his high school. In college, he won an Irish-English boxing championship, like a national championship. And I really loved and admired my father, and I was basically following in his footsteps to be a student athlete. He was a boxer, but too much head trauma in that, so I was a wrestler. And I was a student athlete here at Stanford and all that. Okay, and my coaches at Stanford were awesome. I learned a ton from those guys. They were really good to me. This was one of my coaches here, Mark Schultz, world and Olympic champion, 3-time NCAA champion. And I learned more from the Schultz brothers. Him and his brother were both world and Olympic champions, than I did from any of my professors over there. And that was great. Meeting the Schultz brothers was one of the best things about my time at Stanford. My mother would always say very nice things about my father. She would always build up my father. She would say, your father is so smart. Your father works so hard. Be quiet at night. We always had to be quiet because my father would go to bed early, like 10 o'clock. And she'd say, your father's sleeping. He has to be at work early in the morning. And so anyways, my dad was like the king of the family. And my mom was the queen. And we were a very happy family. My parents were married for life. And I had a wonderful childhood. I was the best student out of all the kids, and it was expected by everybody that I would become a doctor like my dad. Every morning, my dad went to work early, then came home in the afternoon to see private patients. He had a psychiatric office in our house. He would see patients in our house, and we weren't even allowed to answer the door because of the thought that, it was quite often people we knew, so we weren't supposed to open the door, or we knew their families. Other doctors would send themselves, their spouses, their children to see my father. My father had a reputation as an excellent psychiatrist and also as a good scholar. After his last patient of the day, my dad would take the dog for a walk in the park, he'd get some exercise, and then he would eat dinner, and usually a salmon sandwich, oily, with rice and beans and chicken, Puerto Rican style, made by my mom, often with sofrito. And then he would go to his room and he would read books and psychiatry journals and listen to classical music or Irish music. And he would talk up to me if I would, have a chance to see him about history and psychology, and I like that. Once every 2 or 3 months or so, my dad would go with me to the bookstore, and he would buy like 10 books. I would buy about 5 books, and I really treasured these trips. It was a chance to see my dad. I often didn't see him because he's working all the time, and also I was, going to school, playing sports. And my father was like my hero, my number one role model, template person. I unconsciously sort of designed my life in a pattern after him. Okay, now back to the med school situation. My dad noticed that I was sad about losing my girlfriend, and he said to me, "Peter, I think you're depressed." I said, "No, Dad, I'm just sad. I gave up the woman I love for a career that so far to me seems kind of tedious and stupid." And my dad's like, "Oh, Peter, there's lots of other girls. You will find a good one. Medicine is an excellent profession. You have been sad for too long. I think you should take an antidepressant medication." I said, "No, Dad, I'm just sad. It's not a big deal. Most people go through a heartbreak at some time or other in their lives. I know that I have greatness in me. I can feel it. And it's just been harder than I thought, to figure out what I want to do in medicine, what path I want to take, what I want to specialize in. I just can't see a clear path, and I'm trying to figure that out." And I said, "Until I figure that out, I'm going to be sad because I can't direct all my energy to my purpose if I haven't figured out what it is." And my dad's like, "Peter, you've been sad for too long. I have a lot of experience with this sort of thing. I think you are depressed. I think you need to take an antidepressant." Okay, I'm going to get my picture sliding over. Here we go. There we go. My background there. My Irish castle there. Okay, me, Dad, sometimes people get sad. That's normal. I'm sad for a good reason. Now leave me alone. My dad, "Peter, there's a new drug called Prozac. It has great results in clinical trials. I want you to take it. I have some pills here. I want you to take them. You will need to take them for a couple weeks before you notice a beneficial effect." And I'm like, Dad, I know my father loved me. I didn't always agree with him, but I know he loved me and he meant the best for me. And I did have confidence in him. He was my sort of academic hero, and I trusted him. And it seemed crazy for me to take a medication, insane. I had never taken a medication before except for tetracycline and antibiotics for acne. I said, "Dad, I'm willing to take it because you say so, but I really don't think I need it." And I had no understanding of psychiatric medications, and I was very good at memorizing stuff for tests, but I really didn't have any significant clinical experience, so I was a very young guy. All right, so I wasn't afraid of the pills because even though I had taken a pharmacology class, in the pharmacology class all you ever hear is how wonderful all these pills are. That's the old of the pill, send a bill, and cure the patient, and it's always like cure, cure, cure is what you hear in school, but it's not what you see in life. But I didn't know that yet. So at my father's heavy pressure and badgering of me, I started taking Prozac, also called fluoxetine. A couple of weeks had gone by and I was not happier. In fact, I was becoming angry, and I didn't even know why, but I was. I was just getting pissed off. And I also noticed that my sex drive had sort of disappeared. The nurses didn't seem that pretty anymore. I had no interest in spanking the monkey. My dad noticed that I had become irritable, which was a new thing for me. He said, "I think the Prozac has unmasked a bipolar disorder. I think you are bipolar. I think you should take lithium. Lithium is a very good medication. I have lots of patients on lithium." I said, "Dad, me, bipolar? Are you insane?" I go, "You're crazy, Dad. I don't like this Prozac medication. It just makes me angry. That's what's going on." My dad, "Peter, Peter, Peter, give it time. Prozac has great results in the clinical studies. I have a lot of experience with this. This is a common thing for bipolar disorder to be unmasked." Okay. When a person is treated for depression, I have some lithium pills for you. I want you to take these pills. You need to give them a couple weeks before you start noticing the beneficial effects. And then my dad continued, you told me you weren't sleeping as well as you used to. Sometimes the Prozac can cause insomnia. I want you to take this benzodiazepine, Xanax. This will help you to sleep. I was starting to lose my patience with him, but I figured he's probably right. My dad's a real smart guy. He's been a psychiatrist for many, many years. I know he loves me and wants the best for me. He knows this field and these drugs a lot better than I do. He does this every day. It doesn't seem right, my sense, my inner sense tells me this is insane and crazy, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt just for a few weeks and see what happens. If nothing else, this will be an interesting clinical experience. And at that young age, I was too naive. I never even thought that I could open up, medical books or papers or journals and read all about these things and figure them out. I was just, a medical student who studied stuff to take a test. I didn't really have this concept yet of myself as a doctor who could figure out a field. Okay, so I started taking those medicines that my father, made me take. The Prozac antidepressant, the lithium antibipolar, and the benzodiazepine. Okay, anti-anxiety, anti-insomnia medicine. I just trusted my father. But I kept feeling worse. I became sadder and angrier. I was starting to become impulsive, losing control of my emotions. I could hide it from other people at work on my clinical rotations, but I was getting worse. And back in those days, I loved my mother very much, but I thought she was real funny, as she always has been very funny and very nice, but I thought she was kind of stupid. She's just a housewife. She had gotten a master's degree in the past from University of Chicago as a social worker, but, she didn't participate in the discussions with my dad and my uncles about books and other topics, philosophy and history. I never saw her read a book. She had quit working after the kids were born. My dad made plenty of money for everybody. So when I had first come home from California to start medical school and was living at my parents' house, like my first year of medical school, I was studying a lot, and my mom would say things to me, Peter, you study too much. You are a nerd. Why don't you date Linda at the tennis club? She's very nice. My mom had this Puerto Rican accent. She goes, she would be a good wife for you. And I laugh at that because I had a Korean friend, and his mother was like the opposite. You are in medical school now. No talking on the phone. No time for friends. You must study. Whereas my mom was like, you're nerds. Don't study so much. Okay. Now, as a third-year medical student, when my guard was down, my mom could see my emotions. And she asked me, what is wrong? Why are you so sad? And I said, Mom, these pills that Dad is making me take, they're not helping me. They're making me worse, much worse. I bounce back and forth between feeling angry and feeling sad. When I'm angry, I feel like punching Dad in the face. When I'm sad, I feel like committing suicide. My mother said, Peter, don't talk that way. Don't you do that. If you die, I don't want to live. If you think you're going to commit suicide, I want you to kill me first. If you are dead, I don't want to live. I mean it. Kill me first. And I'm like, Mom, I'm sorry. I never felt this way until I started taking these pills. I was just sad then. Now I feel like I'm going crazy. I want to stop taking these pills. Mom, let me talk to your father and see what he says. Your father loves you and wants the best for you. I said, okay. So the next day, Mom said, she spoke to my dad. She said, your father says you need to stay on the pills a couple more weeks before the benefits will become noticeable. And I'm like, you know what? I've been on these pills enough weeks. Okay. I said, let me think about it. And that weekend, I confronted my father. I said to my dad, look, I've had it with these pills. I am not taking them anymore. My father said, that would be a mistake. You need to stay on them a couple more weeks, and then you will start feeling better. Maybe I should put you on a second antidepressant. Maybe I should also put you on a tricyclic antidepressant to go with the SSRI, the Prozac, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I read a journal article that sometimes there's a synergistic benefit to having the patient on multiple antidepressants. Like combining them with perhaps an old-fashioned antidepressant like nortriptyline. And me, I said, Dad, you don't understand what's going on. I'm beginning to think that you don't know what you are talking about. I'm beginning to think your psychiatric drugs are effing bullshit. Dad, why do you say that? Me, because I hate these drugs. They're making me feel like I'm losing control of my thoughts and my emotions. They're making me worse. They're making me angry. They're not helping me at all. There's nothing positive from this experience. Dad, well, what do you mean? I said, Dad, do you really want to know how these drugs make me feel? My father, yes. I said, they make me feel like I want to kill you. My dad, Peter. And I said, you know what, Dad? You can take your effing drugs and shove them up your ass. You don't know what you're talking about. Everything you've told me about these drugs has not come true. Nothing good happens. I only feel worse and worse. And my dad, you feel bad because you're depressed. It's because you're bipolar. Me, fuck you. I'm not depressed. I'm not bipolar. I'm just sad because my girlfriend moved away and I don't like medical school. That's a normal reaction. Dad, Peter, you have a mental illness. Depression and bipolar are mental illness. Me, fuck you. Stanford is the best student athlete college in the world, and I was student athlete of the year at Stanford. That means I'm one of the best student athletes in the whole world. I'm the best medical school student. I'm the best student in my medical school class of 333 students. If I have mental illness, then everyone has mental illness. If mental illness makes me this smart and strong and good, then everyone should have it. You know, my wrestling teams, I coached 2 wrestling teams in high school, and they both had the best seasons ever in their entire history, okay? And my dad's like, oh, Peter, you're being grandiose. That's a sign of bipolar. Me, fuck you, and fuck your phony diagnosis. You are a fraud. You don't know what you are talking about. Anytime I say anything good about myself, you say I'm bipolar. And anytime I say I'm sad, you say I'm depressed with a mental illness. You make it impossible for me to be myself, to just be normal. You go around spouting off all your bullshit, and it's not even true. You are the one with mental illness. I'm just trying to live my life. You're chasing me around trying to poison me. You're fucked in the head. You believe every stupid fucking thing that comes out of these Ivy League schools, and you chase me around trying to poison me. You're fucking sick. I am never going to take these drugs again. Then my dad, Peter, you can't stop taking these medications all of a sudden. You could have a severe withdrawal effects. Just give the pills a few more weeks. Me, fuck you. And I grabbed my father by his collar. He was sitting in a chair, and I tipped the chair back over. I held him down my left hand. I took my right hand, and I put the pill jar in his mouth, and I said, if you ever try to make me take another pill, I'm going to shove it down your throat. Do you understand me? Okay. I was a pretty strong guy. I'm a lot stronger than my father. Okay, so anyways, here's a paper, by the way. Here, let me scroll to it a little bit better here. Here's a paper about Prozac showing that Prozac, also called fluoxetine, is so toxic. It has fluorides in it that help it cross the blood-brain barrier and are also neurotoxic. And as Peter Bregan said, all psychiatric drugs cause a lobotomy, either slowly or quickly. And it's so toxic, Prozac, that this paper recommends it be used for cancer chemotherapy. And here's the title of the paper. The antidepressant fluoxetine induces necrosis, cell death, by energy depletion and mitochondrial calcium overload. It destroys mitochondria, okay? It reduces ATP, energy production. It's toxic, okay? It's a poison. You know, the clinical studies, they're all bogus. They just generate fake results so they can sell the drug, okay? The drug companies make billions of dollars off the stuff, but the patients get sicker. It's a terrible thing. Nobody should take this drug, in my opinion. Okay, so that was the last time my dad ever mentioned a psychiatric drug around me. Okay, I've never taken any type of psychiatric medicine since then, and I lost all respect. I loved my father, but I completely lost respect for him intellectually. The other thing I found was after I had been around Stanford, where things are so academically competitive, on any topic that I read a book on, I could just beat the shit out of him intellectually. Well, there was no comparison. I quit all the pills cold turkey. I did not have any withdrawal side effects. I never again in my entire life took any psychiatric pill of any kind. I never had any recurrence of so-called depression or bipolar. It was all bullshit from my dad. I went on to graduate first in my medical school class. Like I said, my first 2 years, I coached 2 teams to their best seasons ever in their history. I also, my last 2 years, I wrote 2 books while I was in medical school. Medical Student's Guide to Top Board Scores was written by me. Here it is. The dean of the medical school, Dr. William Wallace, he loved the book. He wrote the foreword for this book. It was published by Little Brown. And he said to me, I'm very proud of you, Peter. You're a great person. You're going to become a great doctor. The world would be a better place if there were more people like you. The dean loved me. I mean, he like adopted me as a son, okay? he did get a little pissed off at me that I went to Northwestern for residency instead of Harvard. But I went to Northwestern instead of Harvard because Harvard told me they would take me. They said, just sign the paper, we'll take you. Okay, but the reason why I stayed local was because my mother had cancer and I wanted to help her. I love my mother very much. Anyways, my feeling at this point was my father was such a conformist lightweight that he believed all the nonsense that comes out of the big name medical centers and the Ivy Leagues, and he almost killed me. It was like, get the F away from me, following me around trying to poison me, okay? And that's kind of what psychiatry does to people. Luckily, my mom had common sense, you know. There's a picture of me at my med school graduation. There's my father, there's my mother. I went on to complete a surgical internship, and the chief of surgery repeatedly asked me to forget about doing a radiology, interventional radiology, imaging guided surgery residency, and to become a general surgeon trained in his program. The chief resident met with me. The program director pressured me to quit what they thought was stupid and become a general surgeon. In my radiology residency, I also had 99% boards. A 4.5 hour test I was done in an hour and 10 minutes with a perfect score. I had a new girlfriend, not like the old one, but still quite good. Then I did a fellowship at Harvard in imaging guided surgery and interventional radiology, and I made new editions of my earlier books, published those with Little Brown, and also one with Appleton and Lang. My dad, who loved me, who was supposed to be the best psychiatrist around, chief of 2 departments, was a phony and a fraud. I now knew that. And also I saw a lot of phonies and frauds through the course of my medical training, and I no longer respected people based on their titles. I respected them on what they could prove they knew, none of these titles, because most of the titles are fake. And I was kind of shocked by all this. I didn't understand it then, but I knew my dad was completely wrong. I knew that he had no idea what he was talking about, that he was insane, that he was hurting a lot of people with this psychiatry bullshit. And that taught me how dangerous medicines could be. Because before then, all I ever heard is that medicines are the greatest thing in the world in all my med school pharmacology classes and whatnot. And I like the hype and bust cycle of Jeff Nelson. He referred to how when a new food or a new drug or a new supplement comes out, it has a health halo around it and gets all this industry hype of it being magnificent and some fake bogus study claiming it improves health. And then gradually it starts drifting down and the health halo starts breaking apart. And when enough time goes by, usually about 10, 20 years, people start realizing it's not even just not helpful. Initially they realize it's of no benefit. They start realizing it's harmful. Okay, and that's what I had gone through. Okay, so that was the experience, how I learned how dangerous drugs can be, and that psychiatry is a joke and they're just poisoning people, and everything I've read since that time supports that. So my own father would do that to me, and luckily I had a mother who supported me, and I had enough medical knowledge, academic knowledge, that I could fight my father off. But the average person, a lot of them have no way to stand up to a psychiatrist poisoning them, and it ruins their entire life.